It's like, well, I don't want to tell you what the episode was like and what Scully was doing.
Amazing. Well, John, you want to hit play?
All right. There we go.
Hey, what's up, Internet? It's Chris Krug, and I'm here on the MØTLEYKRÜG Media server with some buddies of mine, including Johnny Hartman, IHAVEROBOTS, who's going to give a little artist talk today. John is an interesting virtual producer, and he's been doing a lot of interesting stuff around AI and VR, and so he's going to share a little bit with us today. It's part 2 of a 4-part artist talk series where we're exploring building AI companions and other kind of virtual world agents and stuff. So anyway, I'm not going to be too long here, but I just wanted to welcome everybody in. We're a group of creatives who are exploring the intersection of technology and artistry and creativity together. So get in where you fit in. And it's nice to have the folks here that are here. So John, you're welcome to introduce yourself and give it a rip. And I'll be here moderating on the side. And if anyone needs anything, let me know.
Sounds great. Thanks, KK. All right, I should be full screen with the presentation now, I'm hoping. Does that look good for you, Chris?
Yeah, it looks
good on my side.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, well, I am John Anthony Hartman, and I have robots. This, as Chris was saying, is week 2 of Chasing the Muse, focusing on Calliope, which is the first of these agents that are getting built. I'll give you a little recap of kind of week 1 here. What we did is we talked a bit about the dialogue flow agents. We built this originally with Google and Sada and a couple of other folks for an architectural model for what's going on in studio with the studio that I was working with. And what we're going to do is take this whole idea and reframe it into what is this new model that ChatGPT and Poe and some of the other instances are starting to do with the kind of idea of a store with applications. AI is kind of replacing apps, right? You can buy these bespoke AI instances. But really we're here because, our brains are hardwired for story. And stories entertain, they inspire, they inform, persuade. People connect emotionally to them, and there's quality stories and characters that are created. It's scientifically proven as well that when you make these emotional connections, they drive memory. And if you want to create a pattern story that sticks with people, right? You want to drive story in a very specific way, and you want to follow some specific rules, or people, they've seen it, people with their brains wired to MRIs, if you break a story's construct, you lose them, because our brains are hardwired for a story. And a story is like a child. They're all unique. None of them are the same. But they must all be cared for and fed. They grow and mature, and in different ways. And if you're a good parent, you know that you're going to need to nurture this child. And you don't want to smother them, because, kids that get smothered have a tendency to not behave well. You really must collaborate. Because again, if these stories, these children are not, if you don't work with them in the right ways and their audiences, you create an issue. And just like rebellious children, you get this interaction with this kind of modern savvy audience that if you try to impose the old paradigms of media and control, you do pretty much the opposite. You lose control. And there's been all sorts of cases where the audience has won. I'll give a specific one. This goes quite a ways back, but I was originally approached as one of the folks to do the Mad Men Twitter with a bunch of folks way back in the day when they first did that. And AMC really just smacked them down and really tried to shut down this fan fiction that was going on in Twitter. Well, the audience totally rebelled, and in the end, I've got a Don Draper card and a Mad Men silver card case, and they did a 180. Let's just say that, because they learned this lesson that if you try to put the old patterns of control on a modern audience, that they will definitely rebel. And as a creator, you need to be able to maintain canon, but you have to be able to apply the ability to have an audience participate. So what we do is, I should probably caveat here, I've been blessed. One of my mentors and a good friend of mine, his name is Jeff Gomez, and he worked with Jonathan at Coca-Cola back in the day and did what they called Liquid and Linked. And you've seen this whether you know it or not. It was the happiness factory. It's all the stuff that Coca-Cola did holistically as a kind of cross storytelling, this liquid storytelling model to be able to kind of create success. And this is one of those we'll wind back into. If you were with us last week, there's going to be a couple of these little teases, and then we'll wind down to get more into this in a little bit. So really what we do is we really get to the nuts and bolts, and the robots really kind of have to understand. We want to understand the data and the structures and the framework of what we're dealing with. And from a development construct and things like that, as a trying to build tools in this space, you have to kind of understand the pieces that we're dealing with. And so you have the beginning, middle, end, the rising action, the falling action, your climax, your core elements of story, right? And we just kind of look at them from kind of two filters, usually from the agency and entities that I've worked with. There's a kind of a brand kind of structure and how a brand will fit into this landscape or this ecosystem of story, and then how an IP plays out across it, right? And those can kind of intermix, but oftentimes brands end up having kind of their own. I helped Intel put together their storybook, their storytelling playbook back in the day with Intel Media Labs, and I took their executives through this and kind of brought them to a core and into these next pieces, which is really like once you start to understand the structures and the pieces and the fundamentals, you're really looking into what are some of these core story plots. And really what I was trying to do with, specifically with Intel and a number of other folks that I've worked with and other IPs and things that I have to be careful about and things that I can and can't talk about, but that, anyway, sorry to get lost in that, is the idea of what are these core plots that we must integrate. So the overcoming the monster, rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, rebirth, tragedy, comedy. These each are very kind of common flows to story, and it's often helpful, especially in the brand side or when you are looking at creating from whole cloth a new IP, kind of what the pathways are and how you're building. And so, we went through the story plots. We were able to, what I did was basically kind of bushwhack them a little bit by letting them tell me what they thought it was. And everyone who thought they were on the same page about what the brand identity was, when they realized that, half of them said the quest, the others said rags to riches, some said overcoming, right? There was a spattering across the mechanism, and that there was no true homogeny. So we worked through that and kind of laid that out from a brand's perspective. But you can kind of see that these buckets really apply for a lot of your, most classic stories you'll ever experience. So the biggest part that we see And again, this I'm going to blame Gomez, I'm going to blame Henry Jenkins, I'm going to blame some other much smarter people than me for this brilliant idea of this evolving the hero's journey, this collective journey. And the fact that the modern audience is very nonlinear and it's democratized. And the stereotypical patriarchal, like a lot of the old roles and ways are very different. And, the gray characters are very explorable in media and narrative these days, where the black and white, this shining star, on the hill hero and the white hat and the black hat villain, that those are a little bit passé, if you will. And that audience is just very much more savvy than they used to be. So this is a bit of a repeat from last session, but really this does become a point where we start to write, and it's this this collaborative collection of the writer's room. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into, at the back end of this session, we're going to start diving into tools. And so we're going to get into these tools straight away. So we're going to get into Poe. We're going to get into Story Atlas quite a bit this session. And then the next session will be a lot more with the integration of the processes that I'm going to take you through, the kind of writer's room tools and exercises that are part of how we frame things, the secret sauce piece at the end. And then we'll take that and kind of work through how that becomes this, working with these AI models, i.e., what are we doing here with Calliope? So Calliope, the idea is to take what was, the idea of a chatbot, right? We all had these kind of chatbot interfaces that, were happening. And it's time to evolve these into kind of narrative agents that can be conversational and multimodal, but we're not quite to multimodal yet. I mean, there are some instances for sure out there, but the true kind of multimodal AI that is going to live and exist among us very soon is going to change the way we access, I think, data and how we go about a lot of the stuff that we do right now. And I'm hoping that makes things a lot more, helps to simplify and let us go back to being more creative and enjoying life and this pursuit of great story and art. So the plan, the biggest thing we run into the majority of the time is when we start to talk about things like transmedia and story worlds and all that kind of stuff is, like, oh my God, I just need to do this little thing. That's just so big. It's so large. How do we even begin to start? And a lot of this comes from a frame of understanding kind of what is the pieces that we're going to go through. So really big buckets. And I'm sorry, this is kind of a one-on-one piece, but it'll help us to give a kind of frame or a taxonomy or categorization to how we're going to integrate these pieces, and really kind of how the strategy and planning and give you a frame for how we do these kinds of things, because this is just especially from coming from a traditional media, digital, the film, TV background, that kind of thing. These are very much the flow, and this really does work for most things that end up in a media when you create media in some way, shape, or form. So you start with the pre-production. You get a great idea. You don't have to write the next great American novel, or even start out with a massive franchise, but it does need to be a hell of an idea. And this is really where you want to spend a lot of your time, is flushing through the great idea and the outline in this pre-production stage. The outline, it all includes the strategies and the distributions and some of those kinds of things as well. And what we usually do is start to frame documents that are kind of collective, and whether those are like graphal diagrams, those kinds of things. Sorry, I was using a software name. But these diagrams or flow charts or storyboards or whatever they are, the kind of outlining pieces that kind of connect the pieces and parts as we build out the initial story world. And once we have that kind of frame and that understanding of where we're going to go, you're never all the way there. You never have enough money. You never have enough time. But once you get to where you either have to go or you feel like you need to go, you move into production, and you find these. It goes beyond kind of traditional film and manufacturing business models. If you look at the modern and coming landscape, I mean, when a kid that's born today in 2024, just consider the media that this child will consume as they get old enough to be able to interact with media. It's going to proliferate. We're already seeing, like, CES was all about the transparent, television. I don't know who all saw that. All right, it's going to become this kind of ubiquitous fabric, at least for the ability for a canvas to display some sort of content or media. And then it becomes, are we wearing our Google Glass, our Apple Vision, our company that hasn't even launched yet's new thing, because that's what becomes it. Dolby's 3D headset pieces. There's so much tech that's reaching the market, that's going to change the media landscape, that we can't even begin to really construct for, other than to know in our process that it's going to be a fabric, and that we need to build for a fabric, and that's going to be woven across these technologies and across these story worlds as well, because you're really in large arcing, and again, I play on the big end of the pool sometimes, oftentimes. But in these large arcing narratives, you really have to be able to start to track all this stuff, and this is what we're going to get into. We're going to say that I'm going to use this as the title of this slide, and it kills my soul in many ways, but you'll hear the words "fix it" in post, and that's almost always by people who, well, either are in post and just don't like people in post, or just have never been in post. And you really, this is where you really want to spend that pre-production time and know that, there's just, the sun's going to go down before you get that shot, and you're going to need to be able to, you're going to have to be able to prepare for probably the VFX shots and things like that. And that's where technical directors and people who know the industry, that's why they get paid what they get paid. There's a lot of reasons like that. So, but this is the place where you look at distribution, you look at the end state of the product. And so what we use, and this is a screen grab of the iPad access for Story Atlas for us. And this is a character breakdown. So we've built out this product, this thing called, I say product. The only reason I say product is because somebody told me I should say that. This is an internal tool that I built because I found needs, and now it's like, well, people might like to be able to use it. I'm like, yeah, they might. So, it's kind of like a GitHub for story that allows creative to maintain canon. We use front-end collection, writer's room tools, all this kind of stuff, and we're gonna dive into this in much greater detail here in just a minute. But when you're managing these large properties with distribution and all these kinds of, all the characters, the assets, the props, the locations, if you were there last week, you saw all those nodes, and that was just a very small snapshot of the nodes from Story Atlas for the different parts, right? We talked about the scripts being specifically held back from certain properties like Game of Thrones. So you want to be able to have the management control on the back end of those nodes, those kinds of things. So there's an infrastructure with those three, pre-production, production, and post, that kind of node as the wheel that we work around. So I'm sorry to kind of go through a really basic 101 for a lot of people that probably know exactly what all that stuff is, but I did want to give a construct to this and get into kind of how we manage this complex cross-channel ecosystem as we try to keep it as simple as possible, so keeping them in the wheel. So here we've reached a moment in time where I think we are, yeah, we're only about 20 so odd minutes into this one. But I did want to spend a lot more time here diving into tools. So maybe, Chris, do you want to take a few minutes and see if we have any questions, and then we can start to dive into some stuff here. Oh, I'll throw that back up again because I'm trying to.
Sounds
Good.
Yeah, sounds great. No one freak out. I'm just going to pass the mic around so that everyone can talk if they choose to. Don't need to run away. Thanks, Johnny, dude. That was awesome, man. I love hearing you talk about this stuff. And every time you do, I kind of better and better actually understand what's going on out there on like so many screens I see on TV and the big screen, even around YouTube and shit like that. So it's like you're pulling back the hood on the magic, man.
Trying to.
If you want your children to be smart, tell them stories. If you want them to be brilliant, tell them more stories.